I'm Tom.
We are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Tom and I found an album that is just way out there and super intriguing, and we really were excited to review this one because we always like it when we can come across albums that really aren't like super big even in the indie underground scene. Like if an album is like good and it's not in the indie underground scene and we find it and get to listen to it and like it and share it with you guys, like it's always like it's almost like this special opportunity that we have because it's the hipster in us. Maybe I'm going to shave this and just have this Burt Reynolds mustache soon. In the spirit of being from Iowa and sucking at pronouncing anything, bear with me here because the artist that we're going to review is Kirin J. Callinan. Callinan, how'd I do?
I think that's how I would say it.
The album is called Embracism. Tom, how would you describe the sound of Embracism? There's a lot of influences here.
Yeah, there are. And what was really interesting to me, you got to understand, before we decided to review an album, we go through kind of a preview process, listen to some stuff that's out there, look around online to see what people are talking about and what we can find. And I saw this album floating around somewhere on the interwebs, and I decided to listen to the first few tracks, and I was like, wow. And what hits me about the first few tracks is his very intense vocal style. Reminds
flamboyant.
me reminds me a lot of Depeche Mode at first. So
the Cure?
Yeah, the Cure. And that's how I would describe this is along with the vocals, just a very abrasive and intense kind of synth sound. I don't want to say synth pop. It borders more on like the industrial side at times.
It's like industrial synth pop.
Yeah, which is where I would compare him to not only Depeche Mode but also like Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah,
I got
really
some Scott Walker in the vocals, even some Throbbing Gristle, which is like forefathers of industrial.
But even like Pulp and Nick Cave sometimes, especially
some
in the
Brit
vocals.
rock.
Yeah,
I totally agree. But that comes in later in the album, and that's what was interesting about this for me is because I listened to those first few tracks, thought, I think this is worth reviewing. Came back to it at another time, and right after track 3, he really switches up the sound.
Yeah.
He goes from just this barrage of this kind of synth industrial sound to tracks 4, 5, and 6 being a lot more subtle dynamically, a little softer. You see a different side of his vocal presentation. You even see different instruments coming into the mix. You see a more kind of guitar, bass, and drum approach at times.
Right, and tracks 7 and 8 are even experimental in nature. Like they're really playing around with his sound. This is his debut album.
Yeah.
As we said, this is I think we said he's from Australia and really doesn't have a big presence. So to hear him just experimenting with his own sound so early on is really cool. Now, towards the end of the album, you have track 9, Landslide, which is this ballad that just kind of just slowly builds, and it's kind of chilling sometimes in the vocals and in some of the lyrics he chooses.
You get low.
And then the last track, Love Delay, which is honestly probably our shared favorite track on this album.
Great closer. Absolutely. It's just one of those like awe-inspiring tracks that just makes you feel good.
It has a punk feel to it.
It's just, I thought, beautifully executed. It's one of those songs that right when I'm done listening to it, I want to listen to it again. And this is, it's an album that was tough at first. I know you really didn't like it at first.
I didn't. At all. Like when I first got into this album, the first couple listens, I was like, "Look, this guy is just out there. He's just trying to be just flamboyant and crazy. He's like, I appreciate that he's experimenting, and I actually could tell that how he was putting together the tracks. It was actually he was doing like a good job of how he included these sounds and transition sound to sound. How artists build tracks and build the songs and then construct the album is important to me, and I could tell he was doing a lot of things right, or at least right in my mind of how it would normally work for an artist who knows what they're doing and is making a good album listening experience. And so it just took me getting through those first few listens, that abrasiveness, that inaccessibility that's just inherent on Embracism. Once I got to like the 4th or 5th listen, I really felt like this was a whole different album than I had listened to the first time. I felt like this album just kind of bloomed in front of me, and I just couldn't get enough of it. The more I listened to it, like especially my favorite tracks, I kept coming back to Halo and Landslide and Love Delay, but the whole entire album is actually a good listening experience.
It really is.
And to tell you the truth, it's a very similar experience that I had to Graham Coxon's A+E from last year. I felt like that album, it was very kind of out there and abrasive, and then over time I just could not get the tracks out of my head. Great songwriting, great approach, and this is the same way. It just has that starkness that I'm looking for.
The important thing is that over time you end up falling in love with most of the tracks. You mentioned A&E, and that was a similar experience where by the time we reviewed that album, I was like, I love every one of these damn songs.
Right.
And it was very close to that for me with this album. The weak part of the album, I would say, if there's a weak part, are tracks 7 and 8.
I agree.
Stretch It Out and Way to War.
Yeah, those are the more experimental tracks.
Yeah, and because of it, there's nothing that really grips me about them, but literally every other track on this album has just been cycling through my head for the past 3 days or so. And they're all good. This album has a lot to offer. It just has a lot of variety in the genres that are coming into it. It has a lot of different sounds, different moods. I think he does a terrific job of matching the lyrics and the vocal delivery to fit the mood of the instrumental background that he's going for. That's something that I'm very sensitive to. If you've got some like dark lyrics on something that doesn't sound like it should be like that, unless you're trying to make some kind of ironic statement that's obvious to me, then I'm probably not going to enjoy it. But songs like Embracism, which is about violence and human nature, it's a freaking abrasive song.
And man, you could really tell in that song he's influenced by Captain Beefheart.
Oh yeah, with the vocals.
How he was doing that.
But then like Landslide, where the vocals get a little more philosophical, a little more introspective, and just the music to fit with it. Some of the lyrics and the way that they strike the chords with the instrumentals are just perfect. I think he's got a keen ear for that, and that's what really keeps me coming back, and it's what makes it one of those albums that when I get to the end of it, I just want to start it again, because the capstones are so strong. You get to Love Delay, and your mind is blown, and you're like, oh man, I could just listen to Halo again right now.
Yeah.
It was, I feel like this was just made for me.
I agree.
Plus, I just gotta say, if you know anything about me, you've watched the show before at all, I like music that scares me.
Yeah.
I like music.
This album challenges our views on music.
It does.
And after listening to 650 albums with a critical hat on, I mean, to have an album that challenges our views on music, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think he does a great job with it.
A couple other things that I think he just does inherently well, and especially, like, what really impresses me is that this is his debut album, and he's already doing these things which I would expect from more established artists, but from a debut, I'm just kind of blown away. He's not only is he incorporating like different styles and citing a lot of artists that influence him, but he makes it his own. Like, it is his sound. Embracism is unlike any album you've ever heard, yet you hear all these different influences that he's combining together. The other thing is that he plays with all these different styles that are still within his sound, and he's able to keep an album listening experience very fluid, and it's one that doesn't stop at all. Even the two weaker tracks, which are together, I'm able to get through and still enjoy. Now, I would say that I would obviously would prefer those to be a bit smoother, but I still think he did a good job shaping and sculpting this album listening experience. So overall, I'm just super impressed. I think that this guy could really do some cool stuff in the future. So I'm going to be keenly watching to see what comes next. Tom, where are you at with this?
I'm going 86. I think this is going to be one of my favorites of the year.
I'm going 83. So that puts this, 85 from Velocities in Music. That is a just killer record. You guys got to go out there, check out Embracism, and let us know what you thought at www.velocitiesinmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesinmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and let us know what albums from 2013 you've been into and like to see us review. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.